OKRs help us to focus on outcome and not input and output. Do you know the difference between those two? So if you work a lot with to-do lists, right? I mean, everybody does to-do list. We're talking about that, and that's good, right? But then you're always talking about input. This is what I do, this is what I do, and so on and so forth. It's good to also think of the output, right? If I do something, what's actually coming out? But the outcome, the result, is actually the interesting thing. And that's what OKRs force you to do. They force you to think in key results, not in inputs. Okay, today I'm handing out 20 flyers. That's an input. Okay, how many people read those things? Output. How many actually went to an event, right? And came here? That's an outcome. And we need to be outcome focused. That's really important. They're always tied to the mission. I said that. We work in sprints. We chose to have 3 months periods, not a year period, but 3 months periods, so that we can break down major goals into small steps. That's the reason why we always work in quarters. And we can clearly define what we actually expect to be the status quo after 3 months. And it has to be a moonshot logic. So not every of those goals can be achieved after 3 months. It should be a 10x logic, right? We're happy if we achieve 70% of the goals. It doesn't have to be 100%. And we want a culture of failure. That's important. So making mistakes is totally fine, and if you're not reaching the goals, that's totally fine. We can adjust, we can move on. We have 3 levels of OKRs. So the first one, we have the company OKR set, where we have 5 objectives and 4 key results. Then we have the circle level, and then we have the personal level. And it all should, in the future, come from both sides. So there will be company goals, but they will be derived from your personal goals as well. Right? 60% of the input comes from the personal goals, and 40% comes from the strategic level. An objective is always a qualitative status, right? And we describe on how we want the goal to be in a qualitative way. And the key result is actually how we reach that goal. It's not describing the what, it's rather describing the how we reach that goal. That's the key result. That's the difference between the O and the KRs. The O's, maximum 5 of them per set. They're meant to be for the whole quarter. So that's actually the status, the qualitative status that we're describing at the end of the quarter. And that's really important to not think in milestones, for example. Say, okay, after 2 weeks and 3 weeks, I want to have reached that goal and that goal and that goal. Every objective is tied to the entire quarter, as is every key result. Every key result is as well tied to the entire quarter, right? It's not measurable, it's rather what do we have achieved, and big projects can be turned into pieces. Right. The key results are then, they are maximum 4, so 5 objectives, 4 key results. As I said, they reflect the how to reach that goal. It's not the qualitative status, but it's more the how do we want to reach that goal. And it needs to be, as you said, quantitative and clearly measurable. So we need to be able at the end of the quarter to say, okay, not reached, 70% reached. It should not be a yes or a no, right? It should be, okay, that was quite good. I scored 80%. It needs to be a range, more or less. Right? And they need to be stretch goals. So stretch goals meaning that we want to overachieve. It's not always easy to reach 100%. So this is the moonshot logic that we want in the key results. And how is that derived? I talked about it briefly last time. So we have, let's assume we have those 5 company objectives and 4 key results. And then you at the team level say, okay, this key result can be transformed into a qualitative objective, and I derive in the team 4 key results. All the goals on the company level should be reflected on the team level, and all the goals on the team level should be reflected on the personal level. And that's actually the challenge which we have to manage, right? So that nothing gets actually thrown overboard. But you have to imagine it that way, that if I always like to compare it to a journey. You remember the bus, right? We have to have a clear goal in mind, and the only way to get there is in small steps. Right? Let's say it's southern France or something like that. So we want to go with a bus to southern France, and then the first stop is perhaps Munich. The next one is, I don't know, somewhere in the north of France, and so on and so forth. And the important thing is we set out a road on how do we want to get there, and perhaps there may be things that distract us, like a beer garden or something in Munich and stuff like that, but we evaluate that and say if we move to that beer garden, right, then it takes us a day or two longer to actually reach the goal in southern France. And this is what helps us with OKRs. We always are clear on what objective to achieve and how we are actually getting there. And if there's something distracting us, then we have to sit down and take into account what's currently distracting us. The best way to get going with the OKRs is just to start, to define them and then to actually discuss about them, because it is about transparency and alignment. We need to actually understand what we're talking about, right? Everybody that used this system told us, hey, the second time you did it was way better than the first time. The third time it was clearly to being very good, and then the fourth time was the first one we said, yes, this is exactly it. This is how we want to work with the system.